Metal groaned like a wounded beast above the fractured skyline of Ardent Spire. The war had left the upper rings in ruins, blackened steel ribs jutted from once proud towers now little more than mausoleums of ambition. The air was scorched and bitter with coolant vapor and ash. Kyle Renard moved silently through the carcass of an abandoned docking wing, his exosuit's boots hissing as they adjusted to the uneven terrain of fractured deck plating. His plasma rifle hung low, the barrel scorched and humming, a living reminder that combat had ended only hours ago if it had ended at all. His orders were simple: retrieve what salvageable data he could from the defunct Valari research nexus before the structure collapsed entirely into the gravity well. But as with most military plans in the Spire, simplicity was a myth. The wreckage teemed with echoing shrieks from the Ember Order's remaining drone scouts, cutting sharp arcs through the dust as they hunted for survivors or witnesses. The human Valari truce was signed but fragile. Kyle was expendable if the truth was inconvenient. The faint beeping of a broken interface led him deeper. He found the console it sparked once, then gave way, sliding open a floor hatch beneath faded sigils he couldn't read. The lift chamber below was dark but intact. His tactical display flickered, weak life sign faint and fading. Kale followed it. The chamber stank of sterilized blood and decay. Flickering emergency lights gave the walls a slow pulse, like the breathing of some metal beast. At the center lay a figure slumped against a collapsed stasis tank, barely humanoid at first glance, with elongated limbs wrapped in what remained of an elegant bodysuit. Silver-white hair tangled across her crimson skin, now dulled with grime and blood. Her breathing was ragged, shallow. Valari. His first instinct was to level his weapon, but something about the scene, the way her fingers curled limply against her stomach, the surgical lacerations along her ribs, the broken restraint clamps spoke of imprisonment, not resistance. She wasn't part of the strike force. She was abandoned. Kale crouched gently, brushing dust from her faceplate. Her eyes fluttered open, glowing with pale bioluminescence even in the gloom, and focused on him. A flicker of fear, then confusion. And something else. Something raw. He activated the translator patch on his glove, whispering, "You're safe. You're not my enemy." Her gaze narrowed. She rasped something in her native tongue too soft for the translator to parse. Kale lowered his weapon fully and peeled off his helmet, revealing the sweat-drenched face of a man far from home and even farther from protocol. Her breath caught as she saw his expression, not rage or dominance, but concern. That was what did it. Her fingers twitched, not toward a weapon, but toward his hand. Human hands were strange to the Valari, blunt, expressive, soft in ways their bioengineered digits weren't. But when he took hers, gently pressing 2 fingers to her pulse node, she didn't flinch. Her skin was cool and trembling beneath his glove. The contact lingered just long enough for something unspoken to pass between them. He moved quickly, stripping spare fiber wraps from his gear to bind her wounds and injecting a stabilizer dose. Her body arched slightly, lips parting in a silent cry as the serum coursed through her failing system. But she didn't push him away. A distant shriek echoed through the ruins. The drones were looping back. Kale looked at her, barely conscious, weaponless, unarmed. Carrying her would slow him down, endanger the mission, break every commandment etched into his rank. But walking away felt more alien than the woman before him. He slid one arm beneath her knees, the other behind her shoulders, and lifted. She gasped as he rose. Not in pain, though there was plenty of that, but in shock. The expression on her face wasn't gratitude or relief. It was disbelief. The kind of disbelief born from generations of certainty that if you were weak, you were consumed. That if you didn't serve your function, you ceased to be. Kale Renard, bloodied, bruised, and technically AWOL, didn't know what she was. But he knew what she wasn't. She wasn't meat. He carried her out as the ceiling groaned again, hunched beneath her weight, rifle slung, breath ragged. She clung to his chest with a strength born not of survival instinct but of revelation. Human males, it seemed, didn't eat their females after the mating season. And somewhere deep inside the remnants of a dying war zone, a new story began. Not with strategy, not with orders, but with a soldier's refusal to look away from someone else's suffering. The tunnels beneath Ardent Spire were a forgotten network of maintenance shafts and escape arteries, never mapped, never sealed, just left to decay beneath the city's gleaming surface. Kael ducked into one of them with Thalia cradled in his arms, her body curled against his chest, like a sleeping ember. Dust coated the air, glowing in his headlamp like stardust, and each step echoed down a corridor that hadn't heard life in decades. The power in her body was strange, fragile, and dense like coiled silk under tension. She stirred now and then, lips parting to murmur incoherent syllables in Valerie, head shifting against his collarbone as if drawn to warmth. Kyle wasn't sure if she was aware of the danger or only dreaming of it, but her fingers remained tangled in the collar of his tactical vest, holding on to him with a grip that belied her condition. He moved fast but cautiously. There were old motion sensors, ember order beacons, and gravity mines in these forgotten arteries, leftovers from conflicts no one dared officially record. As Kyle ducked under a fallen beam, his HUD flickered with a ghost signature heat bloom 60 meters back. Pursuit. He leaned against the wall and slid down slowly, bringing Thalia to rest across his lap. Her head-lolled eyes fluttering open in the dim light. She blinked once, twice, disoriented, but then her gaze locked with his. Kale whispered, "We've got about 2 minutes before someone unfriendly finds us." She tilted her head weakly, the universal signal of, "Why are you telling me this?" He gave her a half smile. "Because you're part of this now." To his surprise, she attempted to sit up. Failed. But not for lack of will. Her breath hitched, and when her hand reached up to brush a strand of silver-white hair from her face, it was shaking but deliberate. "You shouldn't carry me," she croaked. "Slows you." His brow arched. "That's your concern." She gave a weak nod. "You're human. Risk is irrational." A dry chuckle escaped him. "Lady, I was irrational the moment I decided not to leave you in that tank." Her lips quirked. It wasn't quite a smile, but it wasn't nothing. He adjusted her on his back piggyback style, wrapping her arms over his shoulders and securing her legs with a makeshift harness from his belt. She was lighter than he expected, even with her species' higher muscle density. And warm. Not just in body temperature, but in something else. Something that made his skin tingle where hers touched. When he moved again, her voice was a whisper in his ear. Why what?" He replied, breath low, careful not to break stride. "Why risk everything for me?" Kale considered that as they passed a rusted maintenance hatch and ducked into a narrow chute that dropped toward the lower levels. He landed with a grunt cushioning her, then kept moving. "Because no one else would." A pause. "Then your species. You value weakness," he snorted. "No, but we don't punish it either. At least not all of us." Her silence wasn't empty. It was thinking silence, full of unsaid implications and shifting paradigms. Finally, she muttered, strange. "Yeah, you get used to it." They paused at a T-junction, and Kyle drew a small spherical probe from his hip pouch. He activated it with a flick, and it shot down the left corridor, scanning for drones or traps. The right path showed a faint power signature, a steady pulse. He turned right. "What's that?" Thalia murmured. "Could be a fusion battery. Could be a med station. Could be an AI that wants to disassemble us, molecule by molecule." Comforting. Right human optimism. They reached a sealed bulkhead. Thalia stirred more actively, now her voice firmer. "There's a bypass panel on the left, covered in mesh." Kale found it, tore it open. The Valari design was foreign but intuitive. As he worked, she watched her head resting against his back. "You learn fast," she murmured. He smirked. "Human curiosity. Also, I don't like dying." Click! The door hissed open. Inside was silence, broken only by the steady hum of preserved power. A long-dead medical bay, mostly empty, but for one intact unit standing like a shrine at the far end, a cylindrical healing pod rimmed with alien symbols and still glowing with bioluminescent tendrils. "Bingo," Kale muttered. He carried her to the pod and eased her in. The surface shifted around her body, adjusting to her physiology. Her eyes fluttered shut with relief, but then snapped open again. "There's a condition," she said, voice strained. He looked up from the controls. "I'm listening." "The pod's primary matrix is bio-locked. It requires a neural counterpart to stabilize. It needs a host to sync." He blinked. "You're saying I have to get in there with you?" Thalia nodded. "Link consciousness, just temporary. Just until it completes." Her voice faded, but her gaze was steady. Kale exhaled slowly. He'd done combat pair synchronization before short-range neural links during blackout missions, mostly tactical. But this would be different. Deep, unfiltered, a full bridge between species, risk unknown. He looked at her, Valari wounded, strange, terrifyingly fragile, and yet in that moment, something about her was deeply familiar. "I'm not doing this because of orders," he said quietly. "I'm doing it because it's the right thing." And then he stepped into the pod. The outer corridors of Ardent Spire vibrated with residual tension as Kyle and Thalia stepped into the lightless maze of emergency shafts and collapsing conduits. The healing pod had done more than mend tissue. It had sharpened reflexes, clarified perception, and awakened something between them that extended far beyond biology. They moved now not as two individuals but as a singular combat unit. Kale's HUD, previously a sea of data points and error alerts, now shimmered with soft overlays that pulsed in tandem with Thalia's awareness. Tactical calculations, once delayed by seconds of human judgment, appeared instantly refined, instinctive. She anticipated his questions before he could think them. He angled his body before she registered threats. There were no words, only momentum. Down the crumbling rampway, a patrol of Ember Order scouts, half machine, half carbon, swept their beams across the corridors. Normally, Kale would have retreated into shadow-scoped evaluated. But this time, Thalia's awareness bloomed across his mind, like a tide, a vision of the enemy's formation. From above the angle of each scout's movement arced the pulse delay of their motion sensors. She had once helped design these things. Now, through Kyle, she destroyed them. He emerged from behind cover at the exact moment Thalia flared an EMP signature from her own biofield, overloading the nearest drone sensor node. The machines reacted too late. Kyle's plasma rifle spat bursts of cobalt light in rapid succession. 3 figures fell before the rest even registered an attack. When they countered Thalia's awareness, redirected the angles of fire before they landed. A combat protocol emerged Kyle's body, the blade, Thalia, the mind behind it. They advanced through the debris like twin neurons in a living machine. Corridors that once offered only dead ends now opened via her retinal scans. Gravity fields twisted around Kyle's motion, responding to his suit as if coded in anticipation. Her knowledge, once locked behind cultural firewalls, now flowed into his instincts. His courage, once individualistic and human, now carried the clarity of Valari collective logic. They were no longer soldier and survivor. They were weapon and interface, and the battlefield bent around them. An auxiliary control node loomed ahead, a hexagonal chamber ringed with AI conduits. Once a neutral zone, now hijacked by the Ember Order. Embedded within its neural lattice were codes Thalia once wrote in another life. To them, she was obsolete. But the pod had rewritten her signature, blending Kyle's biometrics into her own. The system no longer recognized her, nor could it predict her. She reached into the console, not with fingers but with will. The interface flared in red protest, flashing hostile glyphs. Kyle braced, rifle raised. But before the defense turrets deployed, Thalia's shared consciousness surged into the core node through their residual link. The AI hesitated, caught in a feedback loop it couldn't parse. Kale stepped in, touching her shoulder. The contact created a spark, literally. The turret system shorted, then rebooted under new authority. The room dimmed, and then responded. Turrets swiveled outward. The node reconfigured its protocols. New access was granted. Across the sector, dormant plasma turrets flickered to life. Not in defense of the Ember Order, but under hybrid command, Valari human sync resonant, unaccounted for in any warfare model. The fusion of their neural imprints had created a command key beyond any known signature. Kale's earpiece pinged with a transmission not meant for human ears. Translated, it read, "Unregistered unit genetic interface granted temporary autonomy, classified as binary linked entity." He chuckled without sound. The war had changed, and the enemy didn't know it yet. As they moved toward the central power spine of the station, more drones intercepted them. Sleeker, now faster, triggered by the shifting command structure. But the difference in battle was night and flame. Kyle's shots landed not by aim, but by feel. Thalia's motion wasn't dodging, but directing. Even their shadows moved in tandem, one wrapping the other, spiraling in perfect mirrored form. The enemies seemed sluggish in comparison, their logic bound to one-dimensional programming, while Kale and Thalia danced in a higher rhythm. They weren't simply winning, they were redefining combat. And beneath that victory, something else stirred. In each pulse of adrenaline, in every moment their bodies brushed while ducking fire, something deeper solidified. Not just trust, not just survival, but connection. The kind that whispered of permanence, of inevitability, of legacy. Their child, still only a phantom presence, seemed to move in time with them, a non-existent third heartbeat echoing in their bones. By the time they reached the upper conduit bay, The station had begun to whisper back, recognizing them not as infiltrators, but as catalysts. Something ancient in the architecture responded to their bond. Doors that had never opened pulsed with light as they approached. Energy grids adjusted to reduce interference. The station, long thought to be neutral, was evolving in real time, matching their rhythm. They stood at the threshold of the core. Korvex Tharn's fleet loomed just beyond the reinforced panels. Their fight wasn't over, but they no longer fought as man and alien. They fought as bonded resonance, twin-hearted battle-linked, and together they would break the rules that held the galaxy in fear. The core of Ardent Spire pulsed like a sleeping star, a vast chamber suspended between gravity anchors and braced against the tidal pressures of the planet below. Spires of glowing latticework stretched across the dome in symmetrical veins like the ribcage of some long-dead god. Kyle and Thalia approached the heart of the station with the reverence of trespassers uninvited yet destined. Outside, Korvex Tharn's fleet had descended. The Ember Order, sensing the crumbling of their data dominion, had summoned its final deterrent. Warships hung like obsidian sharks in orbit, their hulls whispering with radiation and readiness. Dropships bled from their bellies, streaming toward the surface in burning arcs. Inside, the core flickered in indecision. The station's AI, fractured across centuries of cross-species conflict, struggled to process the presence of Kyle and Thalia. They were not authorized. They were not kin. They were also not strangers. Their shared neural signature had begun to overwrite ancient command restrictions. The same biological resonance that had unlocked defense turrets now tickled deeper protocols, dormant subsystems coded during the Spire's initial construction. Back then, in a time before war redefined loyalty, the Valeri had experimented with multi-species harmony, an interface that could only be activated by trust, intimacy, and co-evolution. The bond had not simply formed between soldier and scientist. It had awakened a design the galaxy had long since given up on. As Kyle stepped forward, the floor beneath him reshaped circular ripples cascading outward, recognizing him not by rank or species, but by internal harmony. Thalia's presence behind him echoed like a second beat in the chamber's heart. The walls responded with low harmonic resonance. Lights ignited in sequence, drawing patterns in golden filaments across the control structures. The original code, began rewriting itself. The Ember Order noticed. Their communication channels burst into life across the planet. Kyle's suit intercepted fragments, orders screamed, and static counterhacks initiated, override keys deployed. But none of it mattered. The system no longer listened to them. It had found something better. Kyle reached the interface arch and extended a hand. Thalia followed, placing hers beside his. Their palms rested on a curved console of etched crystal. It flared once, then darkened, processing their hybrid biosignature with caution, then with growing trust. In a dozen languages, ancient and dead, the system whispered a phrase. Resonant convergence confirmed. Genesis gate unlocked. Panels along the far wall burst open. Mechanical arms unfolded, not weapons, but tools. Conduits realigned, turrets reverse polarity, and broadcast nodes reactivated with dormant frequencies. Across the spire and into low orbit, a signal pulsed, subtle yet insistent. It was not a call for war. It was an invitation. The signal laced itself into the fleet's targeting AI, confusing it. Where once it saw hostiles, now it saw anomalies. Data flowed in strange formations, human Valeri neural echoes embedded into the comm threads. Orders became static. Protocols froze mid-loop. Korvex Tharn watched from the bridge of his dreadnought as weapon systems dropped offline. His second-in-command reported anomaly after anomaly. Missiles refused launch codes. Tactical drones changed course mid-flight. Some began to return to base, confused, not defective. The Ember Order was losing control, not through force but through resonance. Back inside the core, Thalia had shifted. Her posture straightened, skin glowing with internal charge. She was no longer the broken, hunted alien Kale had found in a ruined lab. She was now conduit and catalyst, an inheritor of her species' buried hope. Kyle felt it too. His mind sharpened with clarity. His body no longer moved by training, but by instinct that matched hers. He could feel her breath in the chambers of his chest. Her anticipation danced along his spine. And somewhere nested in the quiet, between thought and motion, was the thrum of a third pulse, their bond evolving, stretching across dimensions neither of them had names for. Together they reached into the central matrix. A dormant protocol never activated, now stirred Protocol Novastra designed only to awaken when species ceased warring and began blending. The effect was immediate. The Spire's broadcast towers ignited in sequence, each pulsing with a different resonance signature. These weren't messages, they were experiences. 1,000 years of stored emotional frequency, love-grief, kinship, fear, triumph. Each tower radiated a memory translated into waveforms that any species, any mind could feel. It bypassed language and biology. Above the planet, pilots paused in confusion. Hardened minds softened. Orders tasted sour. The invasion halted not because of fear, but because something deeper struck. Recognition. Connection. Even Corvex faltered. His mind, rigid and forged in doctrine, flinched beneath the weight of inherited hatred. But even he felt it a flicker. Not love, not approval, but curiosity, doubt. The war had not been ended with destruction. It had been unmade with understanding. As the core stabilized, Kyle and Thalia collapsed together on the floor, bodies drained but unbroken. Above them, the station hummed in harmony. Outside, ships turned, weapons powered down, lights dimmed with peace. Their bond had not simply healed them, it had rewritten the system. And from that moment forward, the universe would measure history by what came before Kale and Thalia, and what came after. In the aftermath of resonance, the station's lights took on a warmer hue, as if the artificial intelligence that governed Ardent Spire had learned emotion through osmosis. The hum in the walls quieted no longer the cold, mechanical pulse of a fortress, but the heartbeat of something newly aware. Kyle and Thalia stood together at the observation deck overlooking the upper atmosphere, bodies still weakened from overextension, but minds vibrant with a new clarity. Below them, the planet reflected their stillness. The Ember Order's dreadnoughts withdrew in steady formations, confusion weaving through their fractured command network like a neural fever. No treaty had been signed, no fleet had been destroyed. And yet the war had dissolved, not with a scream, but with silence. The signal protocol Novastra continued broadcasting. Subtle and continuous, it slipped between starship comms, encrypted military bands, even civilian satellite drift. It didn't seek to persuade or threaten. It simply shared. The experiences that shaped both human and Valari evolution pulsed in harmonics. A mother's protective instinct, a child's awe at the first snowfall, the ache of loneliness, the ecstasy of recognition. Emotions that transcended biology. Elsewhere on the Spire, a delegation from both sides formed in cautious haste. Scientists, commanders, historians, all descending on the core with instruments and guarded hope. They found the architecture changed. Walls had reshaped. Interfaces once bound to species-specific physiology now responded to mixed touch. Not one, not the other, but both. They found logs buried under layers of forgotten code predicting a hybrid path long before war became their default state. A plan once dismissed as utopian fantasy, a future not of domination or extinction, but convergence. It had been waiting all along. Kyle remained quiet as the specialists worked. He watched Thalia with eyes that now saw more than her physical form. She stood beside him, not only as the catalyst of this transformation, but as its proof. She no longer flinched when human engineers approached. She offered guidance, translated protocols, shared equations, and in turn they listened not out of politeness, but out of awe. The changes within her were not visible to most, but Kale knew. The resonance had left a trace deeper than MindLink, a flicker beneath the surface of her skin. Her body had begun subtly reconfiguring, adapting to a shared blueprint. Not fully Valari, not fully human, something new. And it lived not only in her bloodstream, but he suspected in her womb. The child had not been planned, but it had been made possible, and now it was real. The core's final pulse confirmed it. The interface had updated its definitions, entity classified, dual origin Genesis node. A phrase vague enough to mask the full truth, but precise enough for those who could read between the lines. The first cross-species child, not engineered, not constructed, but born of bond, and that child would be the bridge no peace treaty could offer. Outside the station, peace took shape in hesitant gestures. A Valari scout ship docked beside a Terran diplomatic cruiser. On the surface, Ember Order warlords went silent as their tactical uplinks failed to feed rage. The absence of hate was not yet love, but it was space for something new. Kyle returned with Thalia to the secluded wing where they had first found the healing pod. It was no longer active, but its resonance still echoed faintly. He traced his hand across its surface, now cracked and dormant, and wondered if it had always been waiting for them specifically. The room was still. The air hummed softly with life support and distant seismic settling. Thalia moved to stand beside him. Her gaze drifted outward towards stars she had once believed unreachable. No words passed between them. They didn't need them. Not anymore. Her hand found his fingers intertwining, not with urgency, but certainty. A single touch that grounded them in the moment and yet pointed forward. The child was a whisper beneath her skin. No movement yet, just promise. They left the chamber behind. There would be questions, demands, tests, threats. The old ways didn't die easily. Even if the Ember Order fractured, others would rise. But now the war would not be between species. It would be between futures. Between the gravity of what had been and the momentum of what could be. Kyle and Thalia would not fight that battle alone. Already others were coming forward, Valari engineers with Terran scars, human soldiers who had shared dreams with alien allies. The shared consciousness had not remained contained. Fragments of the resonance had imprinted into the station's systems and radiated outward, quietly, persistently. Seeds had been sown. Somewhere in the far rings of space, a young Valari child might one day feel the dreams of a Terran poet. Somewhere a human pilot might instinctively navigate a corridor designed by alien hands. In time, no one would remember a world where Kale Renar carried a wounded Valari through collapsing tunnels. In time, their story would become myth. But for now it was truth. And that was enough. Across 6 parts and over 5,000 words, you've just experienced a tale of war survival and profound connection. A human soldier defying orders to save an alien woman fated for extinction by her own culture, and in doing so, rewriting not just the laws of biology, but the course of galactic history. Through ruin and resonance, through shared pain and emergent love, Kyle Renar and Thalia Vera proved that even in a universe torn by conflict, the greatest weapon isn't power, it's understanding. Their bond gave rise to a new path for humanity, and the Valari not by conquest or command, but through a heartbeat shared across stars. If this story moved you, if the blend of sci-fi warfare, deep emotional evolution, and a touch of light humor struck a chord, then this channel is for you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below. Tell us what part of Kyle and Thalia's journey hit you hardest. What would you do in a world where love could rewrite the laws of species? Until next time, stay curious, stay human, or Valari.